And notice in this family, we have the old man, we have the young son, and the young daughter. It's a family unit that's very similar to Victor and to Elizabeth Lavenza and to his brother, Ernest. The three members of the family that work together. So it's in some ways like the creature is embodying something that Victor might have gone through or felt about himself. And into that mix comes this other young lady, who is, I think, in some ways a parallel to Justine from earlier on. This character who is introduced into the family is she's an Easterner, she's an Oriental, she's an Arabian. The fascination with Oriental culture at the time of Mary Shelley was pretty strong, and they viewed especially the Middle East as a place of exotic mystery and alien culture. But this woman who appears, whose name is Safi, ends up being both loved by Felix and also in some ways the cause of the family's downfall. It's very similar to what Justine was like. Someone tapped at the door. It was a lady on horseback accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing in a sweet accent the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, and when she saw him threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression, her hair of a shining raven black and curiously inbraided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated, her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with lovely pink. She's a gorgeous woman, very Eastern certainly, but a gorgeous woman, and Felix is obviously in love with her. And when she comes in, it turns out she's an Arabian, and that she is there to visit the family after certain circumstances that have left the family destitute. The long and the short of it is that her father was in prison, and Felix tried to get him out because he was wrongfully imprisoned, and Felix wanted to marry the daughter of this man. And once the man got out of prison, Felix was captured for letting him escape and thrown into prison, and the man did not honor the agreement of giving his daughter to Felix to marry, nor did he try to get Felix out of jail. Instead, he fled with his daughter, and Felix and his father basically were put on trial and stripped of all of their property. And afterwards, the Arabian man gave them some money and left, and now here's his daughter, Safi, who's come back to them, to the family, and she's learning the language of writing and reading. And in a strange vehicle here of literature, Mary Shelley has the creature learning the language at the same time that Safi learns the language. My days were spent in close attention that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters, as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. So he's learning the language at the same time as the Arabian, again a vehicle so that he can speak it and write it and read it later on in the text, but also something of an example, I think, of human development. And when we look at somebody else in the class, oh, I'm learning better than they. And I think that's sort of what he's going through, although vicariously through the chink in the wall that he's looking through. And while he's learning from a text called Volney's Ruin of Empires, which is a text about history. And so he's learning also about the history of humanity at the same time that he's learning the language. But his thought about history is interesting because it leads him to question the nature of the race. What is the human race really like? And as he says, these wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. Again, it brings up a question for the creature, which I think is very profound. It's a question of what are we as humans? When you look at the history of our race, we see greatness and nobility and honor and virtue, and at the same time we see horror and degradation and violence. What is a human person that can do such horrors and such greatness at the same time? What does it mean that every one of us is capable of doing these things? I think these questions that the creature asks make him in some ways more human even than Victor, because he's asking these questions, whereas we didn't ever see that sort of question in Victor. That same questioning gets even more personal with the creature as he begins to ask questions about his own nature. What is he in the scheme of human beings? He says, "What was I? Of my creation and creator I was absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was besides endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled and whom all men disowned? I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge." This creature, this monster, this thing that we would expect to be just violent and brutal is really of a very refined nature. He's asking questions about what am I in the grand scheme of the universe? What am I that I don't even know my own creator? Am I something totally different? Am I a monster from everybody else? Now, if we look at this as a metaphor for a human person, how many people have asked similar questions about themselves? Am I monstrous? Is there something monstrous about a human person and about me personally? And he goes on to reflect about the fact that the more that he learns, the more that he knows, the more these questions get increased. They don't find answer necessarily. He says, "Of what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind when it has once seized on it like a lichen on the rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain. That was death, a state which I feared yet did not understand. There is one means to overcome the sensation of pain." Human beings are frequently trying to escape our pain, our physical pain or our mental pain or our emotional pain. But the creature says here there's only one way to escape pain, and that's death. As long as you're alive, you feel pain. That, again, is a remarkably profound statement. Consciousness causes pain. Love causes pain. The experience of being alive is itself painful. And one has to come to grips with that. We have to deal with the fact that as human beings, all of us had that experience of pain. The creature here is an embodiment of that human grappling with our existence, grappling with the fact that we're going to feel pain. So we're left at the end of this chapter with this creature developing tremendously sensitive emotions and thoughts, asking questions like, what was I? The question again recurred to be answered only with groans. He has no answer to what he is. And he's asking that question perpetually. I think that shows something interesting about the creature, that he's not this monstrous, violent thing at the beginning of his narrative. Rather, he's something that's rather sympathetic. Our heart goes out to him in a way. Like, we've been through things like this. And so we don't see in him something that is violent and rapacious at first. Rather, we see a human person, a fellow human, even if he is an artificial human. The artificial human is in some ways a vehicle so that we can understand certain questions about ourselves.